Naya?
Yeah, Eid Mubarak to everybody. MashaAllah.
All right, let's begin. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. Amma ba'd, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody. Alhamdulillah, today's Friday Night Lights.
Oh, you have this on?
Yeah, my mic is on. Today's session, inshallah ta'ala, is going to be about one that the entire country is discussing these days, and that's the issue of abortion. Obviously, because of the environment that we're in, where the Supreme Court may be overturning the, famous case of Roe versus Wade, which legalized abortion, and you'll see always this referral back to the, those who contend, the issue of the delegalization or the criminalization of abortion as being some sort of return back to the Middle Ages and to Sharia law. And the question then becomes, well, what does Sharia law actually say? So we wanted to actually have a discussion today with regards to the Islamic position with regards to abortion, and we have a beautiful group of esteemed panelists here. We have Sister Reem Sheikh, who is a graduate from Qatar University, the Faculty of Sharia. She's also currently pursuing a master's degree from Harvard University in Islamic Studies, as well as the author of an article published on Muslim Matters on what Islam actually says about abortion. So we're happy to have her with us. We have Sheikh Walid, who's a permanent member of the American Muslim Jurists Association, which is our major fatwa body here in the United States, AMJA, as well as a PhD in Islamic Studies, Islamic theology in particular. We have, as well as Sheikh Walid's taught a course called Complicated on Women's Fiqh for over a decade, mashallah. So all of these questions he's been teaching for over at least 10 years and researching, I'm sure, much longer than that. We have Sheikh Kamal al-Makki, who's the lion of the Sunnah. And generally, he's been voted People's Magazine's coolest Sheikh of the year 3 times in a row, alhamdulillah, among a number of other things.
And Sheikh Ammar too,
I'm
mashallah.
Sudanese as well, so that's about it. That's about it. So, studying on the topic of abortion, just immediately. Turn my mic up.
It's not working.
Was it on? Hold on, let me turn it on.
I told you, man.
1 2 1 2. Okay, start over. No, I'm not going to do all of that again. Alhamdulillah. For those of you just joining us, inshallah ta'ala, my mic wasn't working for the beginning part of it.
Is that why you said all this about Sheikh Kamal?
Yeah,
because
yeah,
the microphone was off?
The microphone was off, and I just
I'm glad it was
praised
off.
everybody. But really quickly, for the purpose of the microphone, we have, is it too loud now?
Yeah, put it down. The way it was, yeah.
We have our beloved panelists and guest, Reem Sheikh, with us. She's the bachelor's degree in Islamic Sharia from Qatar University, as well as a master's from Harvard University. We have Sheikh Walid, our esteemed, our resident mufti and scholar and imam, as well as Sheikh Kamal as well, our resident lion of the Sunnah. So we're good to go, inshallah ta'ala, for the recording. We're going to be talking about abortion. That's the idea, inshallah ta'ala. So right from the get-go, Sheikh Walid, as far as the, this topic of abortion, are there any major points that you'd like to just set as a framework for this discussion?
Okay. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wa rasulillah. First of all, I want to wish everybody a very happy Eid. I know it's kind of late, but I hope you guys enjoyed your Eid, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from all of us our good deeds during the month of Ramadan. The second thing I would like to say in regard to this as a framework, it's so important when we address issues like abortion. There's 2 things here in my mind. Number one, we need to go back to the scholars and see this is not a new issue. This issue has been discussed by the Muslim jurists from a very, very long time. And there's a lot, as you will see, and we talk, inshallah, about different opinions about. There is an area where there is an agreement between the scholars with regard to abortion, and there is an area where there is a dispute between the different madhab. Even inside the one madhab, you will find a dispute among the scholars of that madhab, as you will see during our discussion, inshallah ta'ala. So it's important for you to understand where is the area there is a consensus, where is the area where is a dispute. And also, it's so important to understand why these opinions were made. Based on what? Based on what bases? You know, because there's a very different ways of looking to the issue of abortion from a secular framework and a Muslim framework, or Muslim's lens. Or looking at it from a Christian, for example, or any other group. We have a way to look at this, and we have to look at these principles. The second thing that I would like to say, that Muslims should have a voice in social issues. And unfortunately, a lot of time that we found Muslims do not have a voice when it comes to these social issues. And actually, it is sad to say that a lot of people don't know exactly where Muslim stands. You know, because in social issues, a lot of people who represent Muslims in these issues, not people with Islamic background like Reem or Sheikh Ammar, Sheikh Kamal or Sheikh Ibrahim, no, the people unfortunately who represent us will look at it from a perspective or a lens of either a very secular or liberal or political, and that became a problematic in my opinion. That's why the general public, many times I was asked, where do you guys exactly stand on the issue of abortion? You know? And I think Muslim can enrich that debate in the country, can bring common sense to the people. So I'm glad that we're doing this tonight, and I hope I know non-Muslims can hear us, listen to us, see what we can offer as Muslims.
So the aim is for this to be a little bit of a free-flowing discussion, not just amongst the panelists, but the esteemed guests that we have here as well, because there's so much that there is so many different points that are of incredible concern to the discussion. And so Sheikh Wadi just mentioned the importance of framework. A lot of times with regards to, even when people forget Muslims being absent from the discussion, even when Muslims are part of the discussion, a lot of times they're not presenting our own framework, but rather just adopting a current framework, right? And just regurgitating the same talking points. So you just pick a camp, and then you regurgitate their talking points. So Adeem, actually, if you could just talk about the issue of pro-life versus pro-choice, and which one do we fall in? Do we fall in one neatly, or are we? Do we have our own?
All right. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Can everybody hear me? Is it okay?
A little bit louder.
So I think it's important to establish that Islam or the Sharia itself is not trying to align itself, with one political party or the other. The Sharia was set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a set of guidelines and rules that accommodate each person's, context, each person's needs, the society's needs as a whole. So as Muslims, when something, something such as what is happening now with abortion comes up, and Muslims' first response is, the Sharia is actually pro-choice, or the Sharia is actually pro-life, I think that's an incorrect stance, because the Sharia is neither. Sometimes it is pro-life, sometimes it is pro-choice, and it just depends on the situation, what the individual situation, the individual's context. So to put Islam or to put the Sharia with one or the other, or to say the Sharia is actually this, the Sharia is actually that as a form of defense, makes it look like that the Sharia is trying to be adaptable or flexible to something that's political, while it's not, because the Sharia is not there for a political, for political defense. It's there for the individual and society's context. So the Sharia gives a lot of importance to the life. It gives a lot of importance to the body, which is an amana to every single person. It gives a lot of importance to the context of each individual. And it's incorrect for us to try and mold the Sharia to be what we want it to be for our own political benefits.
So you said body being an amana, right? One of the famous slogans of those who are pro-choice is "My body, my choice." Do you think do you believe that to be a correct framework as far as the way that the Sharia presents our bodies?
No, I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us our bodies as an amana, so it's, my body, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's choice. And He tells us how to take care of our bodies. He tells us, we have the guidelines in place, we have the rules in place, what to do with it. In the end, the entirety of our lives, not just our bodies, but the way we act every day, the way we are with ourselves and with other individuals, it's all according to the Sharia and all according to what Islam says. So to say it's my body, my choice, kind of undermines the presence of the Sharia in our lives. It's there, it's already given us guidelines on how we should act with our body and how it is an amana to that we are supposed to take care of, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to us to take care of.
Do you mind if I switch? It's my eyes just getting from the light. Can you come here? Yeah. Sorry. I got very irritated.
Sheikh, you want it to be next to the flowers?
No, the light is just...
Okay, mashallah.
And also it's much better. Okay.
Now your light's affecting me.
Yes,
I like it. My body, Allah's choice. I love it. Very good. Well said. Very well said.
All right. Here's my input, okay? So part of my field of study is what is known as research methods. And in research methods, you learn a lot of things, but one of the things you learn is how data can be manipulated, and the same data can show different things. Even a same graph, you would cut it in a way and put it in a way where it accentuates the difference between this column and the other column. So you become very aware of how people use words to get what they want. There's a book called Words That Work, and it's by Frank Luntz, and he's basically this man. You can tell him, I want the poll to show this. I want your service to show this. And he'll reword it in a way where he'll get you what you want. And there are famous examples of people who witnessed a car accident and they were told, how fast was the car going when it hit the other car? And then they gave an estimate. Then the same group of people were asked, or another group were asked, how fast was the car going when it crashed into the other car? And just from changing the word hit to crashed, they estimated the speed at much higher. So you can manipulate. So I want the Muslims, and we actually did this too in Ramadan, and a group of non-Muslim visitors to the masjid, and we brought this up to them, how things can be manipulated. So I want to read some numbers here about regarding abortion numbers.
Come on,
all right?
get this to...
So look, and these are just some basic numbers. 1996, there were 1.3, or look, I'm going to round them off, 1.4 million abortions in America. In the year 2000, 1.3, 2002, 1.3 million, 2005, 1.2, 2011, numbers are dropping now, 1,060,000, 2017, 862,000 abortions, right? Now, a nurse told me once, she used to work at an abortion clinic. She said the same teenager would come in and get an abortion 16 times, the same girl came to the same clinic. And another teenager would come 13 times, and this one would come 7 times and 8 times. But when the discussion is brought up on television, what do they bring up?
Rape victims.
Rape victims and victims of incest as well. All right? That's how it's framed. And surveys show that 80% of Americans are pro-abortion in the first trimester if it's rape or incest related. 80%. So now, if I see a number like this, then I want to present it as that the whole time so I can get more and more support. So every time you see a debate on television, they bring up rape, they bring up incest. Now let me show you some other numbers here, if you'll bear with me. And this is comparing 2004 to 1987. The reasons behind women getting an abortion, all right? So not ready for another child, timing is wrong, 25%. Second number will be 1987, 27%. All right, can't afford a baby, 23%, 21% for 1987. And I'll just skip some of them. Husband or the partner wants me to have an abortion, but for cases where it was rape and was a victim of rape, 0.5% in 2004, 0.5%, and 1% in 1987, and incest, 0.5% in 2004, and 0.5% in 1987. So you come on TV and you make it sound like 90% of what I'm talking about, I'm here to defend rape victims, and I'm here to defend those who are victims of incest and what have you, but it's 0.5% and it's 1%. So that's the first thing how people are being deceived about this issue. They always bring up that sensitive topic, and this is used in many different areas. I don't want to talk for too long, but one of the things they'll bring up are extreme cases. A case of an 11-year-old that was raped, and then they bring her up and say, why would you tell her she's 11? Why would you tell her she has to have a child now? So I want the Muslims to be aware of these kinds of games that are played and things that tug at your heartstrings and your emotions. Be aware of that, and be aware of what percent of the time that is the case, as opposed to just some girl who keeps coming back to the clinic 16 times. 16 times, that's ridiculous. So be aware of that. And I've got some other little games they play.
That 16 times, couldn't that also be on the other end something that's an extreme? Right? So if they're playing to one issue of 11-year-old girl being, that's like an extreme case, then the girl who comes 16 times, she might be an extreme case, and the majority of people are somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, possibly. But the point is that, and I actually have a lot more statistics here. I've got broken down by what percentage of girls from ages 15 to 20, from 20 to 20 or to 30, and then 30 to 35, and like that. And
yeah, but I think also Sheikh Kamal is not basing his argument on the case of somebody came 15, 16 times.
Yeah.
That's not the basis for the argument.
Okay.
Just an example.
Yeah.
But the base usually in the main thing in the argument is just, we're defending basically the woman who get raped, or
whether she comes 16 times or 2 times, at the end of the day, 0.5% are the ones that are raped. And we make it sound like it's the 90%. That's my
I
point.
also would like to say that the issue of my body, my choice is consistent with the concept of what freedom means in modern society today. Freedom, which is basically a value that we all value, but Western civilizations and modern civilization in general is based on in a very different perspective to the concept of freedom than how we see that freedom is. So basically, especially after the French Revolution, we're talking about the freedom of being controlled and told what to do by a supreme power or God. And that was directly linked to the people who claim to represent God on earth, churches or like religion, or I can't be controlled by religion because I don't see this religion fits to control me. I don't see the religious people fit to control. They're basically allied with the kings and all the history. That's not the time for it. There's a lot of history loaded with that terms. Came to free the society from this enslaving of society in the name of God. So there became a rebel against anything that religion or authority to control me. You know what? I basically control myself, not anymore. As someone said it, he said, it's a time for human to be controlled by themselves, not by some mysterious one in the heavens. So that's why you see this.
Or by the state, right? Or by the state. People have, that's what the challenge is.
So it is that's why you see the conservative will argue and tell you, let the people vote. So basically, both end goes in the same principle, which is the freedom of people to choose. Those who pro-life or pro-choice, at the end of the day, they will tell you, let the state settle the matter. Even today in the court, what the Supreme Court is trying to say, refer this to the state. If they vote like Alabama or Texas, that's the people's will. Yeah. It goes back to the same root of the concept of freedom. But this is, look at the freedom of individual, this look at the freedom of the majority.
Yeah, I always say that. I always say this in Muslim countries. I just want you to wake up and realize, because a lot of Muslims calling for secularism and stuff, when you take God out of the equation, man, and by that I mean mankind, becomes God. That's it. mankind becomes the one that makes all the decisions, what is right, what is not right, what is okay, what is not okay. And that's a big deal. I wish Muslims would wake up and realize that when you take God out of the equation, khalas, you become God. You decide what is acceptable, what is not. And that's why the abortion debate, back when I was much younger, we had a debate in class in the university about the abortion and I refused to discuss it. I told them I'm not going to discuss it because, again, it was an extreme position. But I'm saying that I'm talking about the cause behind it. You're in a godless society. Everyone, you do what you want. And in the end, we're going to talk about these buzzwords of, no uterus, no opinion. This kind of nonsense that they say. And, all right, since I brought it up. Look, Muslims are falling for this nonsense all the time. No uterus, no opinion. So you can't open your mouth, you don't have a uterus. Even Muslims say this garbage. No man should give a lecture about hijab. You don't know what it's like to put on hijab. Wallah, really? This is how it works now? So this is how everything is done now? So you cannot lecture about something if you didn't live type. All the prophets were males. They lectured about everything related to women. And historically, all the scholars were, the majority of scholars were males. And they spoke about hijab. What is missing from their commentary that the woman who put a headscarf on realized that they didn't realize? What? You've been alive and wearing hijab give us the point that men have been missing for the last 1400 years. We fall for that same kind of nonsense. Nobody should talk about this unless no, that's not true. But this is a way, again, of shutting people down. Like if you don't have a uterus, you can't speak. And I'm going to talk about other ones. I don't want to hog all the discussion, but there are other little things that they say to shut you down so you can't open your mouth.
Yeah, but I don't think also we have to recognize that there is perspectives, we will never be able to get it. Like I never understand what it means to wear hijab. I understand the rules, but I don't know what the feeling of it. What it feels to have hijab all the time. That absolutely something should be, But we're not men versus women. We are men and women.
Yeah.
That mentality of modern society, men versus women, we should not fall in that trap. Like what you said, I don't need to shut up, but you know what? I also should not, I don't think you ever, none of us will advocate for, I want my sister to speak about this issue as well. And there is an area where definitely they will have the upper hand. Definitely they will go. Like for example, one of the points I would like to hear, if any one of you guys, I'm not going to talk about it right now. I will keep it. But I dealt with a lot of sisters came to me talk about abortion. But I don't think there's anyone ever can tell you what exactly means to have an abortion except a mother. It's just that feeling in itself is just unbelievable. It's just something. Yes, I talk about so dry rules from this day to that day, but the actual feeling of it, what did that mean? What will, I don't know if your paper talked about why would even women go to that direction? What it takes for a woman to take that step. It's just so unnatural to me.
I think that's like one of the things that when women say no uterus, no opinion, a lot of the times it's incorrect. But in a few, I think, exceptions is, I don't think it's like, oh, you're a man, so you can't talk about the rulings of abortion, but rather you can't say as a man, oh, if I were pregnant, I would never do that, because you could never.
A man would never
pregnant.
say if I were pregnant.
If he says that, he's not a man.
Or if that was me, if I was in her position, or if that was me, I could never do something like that. And in these kind of situations, there's a lot of empathy lacking, because it's very easy for someone to, I'm not a mother, so obviously I can't even relate to something like that. But it's very easy for a man or someone who's not a mother to say, oh, I could never do that to my child, or I could never do that if I was her. While of course, there's no love like the love a mother has for their child, and it's very important to be empathetic in this situation and understand if something comes to that case, usually, or most of the time, it's not because the mother is heartless and doesn't have a heart and does not care about what's in her uterus or the fetus that she's carrying. Obviously, there has to be something very extraordinary in that situation for a mother to be pushed to do something like that. And no matter what the reason is, even if it's risking the mother's life, there is no way that this was easy for the mother. Impossible that it was easy for the mother to do, to make a decision like that.
So let's
So
talk
Ammar,
about the
I
rules.
really, have you ever approached by a sister told you, I want to do an abortion?
No,
Never.
never.
Sheikh Kamal?
No.
They all come to me? Reem, have you ever been approached by a friend or somebody tell you, I want to do an abortion? No. Sheikh Ibrahim? You make me.
How many
At
cases
least-
are we talking about
I'm
here?
talking about at least 20, 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sheikh, you
I
give
just-
out your phone number a lot, though.
Wow.
But you're also at a different level. Why would they come
Yes.
to me? If they come to me, I would send them to him.
Who's gonna answer your? You don't even answer your phone.
Wow.
That's,
Here you go, one of them.
And I called, I think, 2 different jails, 3 different jails. And I'm just being very honest, the most empathetic and understanding response that I got was,
Yeah, salam.
that's why they come to you. They tell each other.
Exactly.
and you actually, you gave me the permission to do it. And subhanAllah, just 2 weeks ago, I got a private message from her, and I conveyed the message to her, and she said that was like the most blessed answer she had gotten. Because it changed
MashaAllah.
what she would have been in a situation at that time, and what she is in right now is very good.
What I just want to say that every single sister, like what you said, ask me about that, couples or a mother. Behind it's a very, very sad story. Is it a child who's like sick, or a rape case, or out of wedlock, or genetic disorder, or life-threatening for the baby, or she had 2 babies, one of them dead, and she has to sacrifice one of them in order for the other one to survive. It just so many examples that is so painful. Like these, you feel the pain in their voices and when they talk about it, and the fear as well. So I just want to make sure that we recognize that as we talk as well.
Well, Sheikhna, you just mentioned like 4 different circumstances or 5 different circumstances that I would imagine the answers would be different.
Sure.
So let's explore some of these. So you mentioned, for example, the woman who's afraid of.
How about start with the area where there is a consensus?
Okay, so let's start with that, inshallah. Reem, do you want to tell us where the consensus is when it comes to the and work backwards, basically? Where do all of the madahib agree that it's not allowed, for example, for?
So there's 2 cases where there's unanimous consensus amongst all the madhahib and all the scholars that abortion is not allowed. The first one is after 120 days, if it's not risking the life of the mother. So if there's no risk towards the life of the mother and it's been post 120 days, then in no circumstances it's allowed. And the other one is in fear of poverty or fear of not being able to pay for or financially support the child, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ خَشْيَةَ إِمْلَاقٍ or مِنْ إِمْلَاقٍ. So it's unanimous consensus that you cannot have an abortion out of
What does that
financial-
mean? What does that verse mean? Just
So
translate it.
وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ خَشْيَةَ إِمْلَاقٍ is do not kill your children out of fear of poverty. So the scholars took this verse and said that abortion is not a solution if someone is scared of poverty, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says right after that is نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكُمْ وَإِيَّاهُمْ or نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكُمْ وَإِيَّاهُم. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we will feed you or take care of you, and we will take care of them if there's a fear of poverty.
There is no consensus on this. Absolutely no consensus.
On which one?
The second one.
Okay.
There's a lot of scholars said you can have an abortion for no reason, 0 reason,
After 120 days?
before 120 days.
She's saying after 120 days.
No, after 100 days for the risk of the mother life.
Okay.
But for poverty or for no reason at all, or any reason, no matter what, especially the poverty, there is a dislike. Yes, absolutely agree with you. It's a minority group, but that exists in the Hanafi madhab, exists in some of the Maliki madhab, so it exists in the madhab, across the madhab. I don't think there's a consensus. Absolutely, there's agreed.
Can you clarify, do you mean like on the poverty or no reason at all? Because I was talking specifically about
No,
poverty.
no reason that will also include poverty. So even some of them specifically said for poverty is dislike, yukrah, among the fuqaha. So, because if you allowed it for no reason, for any reason, basically, they said it's allowed for any reason, because that leads us to the second point. Why there is a difference of opinions about ijhad? Goes back to one fundamental issue. Is that considered a living thing or not? So those who believe it's a living thing, those is not allowed to terminate. Those who don't believe it's a living thing yet, they don't consider the termination of pregnancy is forbidden. Then this debate go to another level, which is when it is considered a living thing. Please, it's considered a 40 days, is it considered, and you will discuss this, but see there is like two layers of it. So if you don't consider this at all a living thing, you can terminate it. It's just like they consider this as like, you know what, you rush your period, that's it.
Yep.
You flush it. So, and it's not considered anything. Even they have some strong words in regard to this. So definitely the consensus is a very strong word. So, but definitely you're right if we say this is almost consensus or almost agreement. There's a like very strong agreement among the scholars on this.
You're talking about specifically about
before
any
the
reason.
120 days, there is no consensus.
Okay.
After the 120 days, there is consensus. You cannot have
An abortion.
Abortion unless, which is it? Unless there's a threat for the
Mother's life.
mother's life or well-beings.
Is there even consensus, Sheikh? Because I was listening to Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen earlier, and he says that even if there's a threat to the mother's life, after 120 days, you're still not allowed. And the reason why he was saying is because we're not allowed to do away with a life to save another life.
I agree.
You agree with what?
But what about there's the argument from the scholars that the mother is the asl, while the janeen is the farj.
Yeah,
But there is no
that's
consensus.
the argument.
It's a strong, but even this consensus, it's consensus, very hard word to say. But in the Hanabila, they have, among the Hanabila, even after 120 days, they will say
Even
no.
if it threatens the life of the
Even
mother.
threaten the life of mothers, because there is a debate. There's no consensus. But definitely there is almost an agreement between the fuqaha in modern days, almost.
After 120 days.
So the word consensus is strong, but I think the evidence, the principles, like what, it would be nice if you explain to them why there is a principle. Very good point.
So the principle that I mentioned, the asl and the farj, asl means something that is the primary or the original, while the farj is the branch or the secondary. So the mother is considered the primary. So she is the root basically, and the fetus or the unborn baby is the farj, or the branch, something that is secondary to the mother because it has not been born yet. Obviously, once it's born, then it is by itself its own asl. But while it's still in the fetus of or the uterus of the mother, then it's considered to be a branch of the mother and not something on its own.
Also, there is another principle that they use, which is al-yaqeen la yazul bil-shak.
Great.
Which is, we 100% know that the mother is alive and will. So we don't know if this baby will be born alive or not. So you cannot risk what you're 100% sure about it for something you're not 100% sure about.
You have an established verse life.
The counter argument is they say the baby is 100% known to be a living, and the mother is 100%, and you can choose one life over another because they're equally sacred. And that's where Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen and others comes.
So, Sheikh Kamal, someone might have asked, hearing Kareem talk about this notion of 120 days, where did 120 days come from? Why this particular number?
Oh, don't ask me about that. Ask me about
What do you want?
Don't ask me about that. I was gonna say, I don't know how I ended up in this class before. It was something about medical ethics or something like that. And they gave us this case where the mother is terminally ill and she decided to die, not get treatment, and let the baby live. And then at the time of labor, changed her mind. She said, you know what, I changed my mind, give me the medication, I decided to live, and we lose the baby. So then there was a debate, what happens in this case? And in this case, and we've got a lot of medical professionals here, at least this was Virginia, they were saying, in this case, the state has an interest in that child.
I'm just wondering, what did you major in where you took a medical ethics class?
That's why I said I don't know how I ended up in that class.
Okay,
but
okay.
you know, I made a lot of mistakes on the way.
No, you said state of Virginia, huh?
That was the biggest one. So even the state has an interest in that child, especially, but this is specifically the case where the mother is dying or made that decision. And now I want to go back to making sure that my point was clear. I am not discounting the added value that a woman's experience brings to the table, but I am contesting the fact that this lack of added value would disqualify the male from opening his mouth. That's all I'm saying.
100%.
Just so we're clear.
It's like you don't have a beard, you can't talk about men issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know what's interesting is that you get to the point where you extend this idea, you extend it to everything. So we see, for example, this notion of you can't talk about narcotics if you've never experienced narcotics. You can't talk about a particular lifestyle if you've never experienced that lifestyle. And that's not true. I can talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's judgment, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's judgment on something, without having to experience it. Some people might be more inclined when they know that this person has come from that background. This person has gone through all of these experiences. Yes, and they might be able to add nuance, maybe, but as far as the actual judgment, that's not a requirement. Yeah.
Ammar, is it true that this is the woman's right only? I mean, so many times also we forget about the father.
Yeah.
In this discussion of...
You know, again, it's framed, like what Sheikh Kamal mentioned, is that it's framed with, yes, ideally, for sure, if you're talking about
no, from our perspective as Muslims.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it is the right of the father as well, of course, with regards to having children, inshallah.
I mean, even Islamically, when you look at the opinions of the different madhahib, for example, like the madhahib that allow abortion, for example, before 40 days, they say, like the Hanbali madhab says, you can have an abortion before 40 days if both the mother and the father agree.
Yeah.
So it is important, of course, for the father to agree in this situation. Yeah.
It's like contraception as well. Both have to agree. It's not just my body only or my decision only as a man or a woman. Both has to agree into that, to agree into contraception methods.
So really quickly, Sheikh, do we believe in family planning as Muslims? Is that allowed? Family planning.
I do believe, yes.
Or should I just have as many kids as I want and just rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's it.
No, basically, it is allowed to plan, okay, for your children. And you say, you know what, I'm going to break down every 2 years, 3 years. And also, if you have a children that you know that you will not be able to handle them, and because there's a lot of mental issues, health issues related to, you are, in my opinion, allowed to stop
But
pregnancy.
financial issues, no.
Even in financial issues, it's not about poverty. It's about your ability to provide for these children. You know, life is not as simple as it used to be. There is a lot of nuance for this today, in a sense that college, schools, educations, diapers, you know, there's a lot of things. And you have to plan well. You have to have an income to plan with your life and to go with it. And if it's happened, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will go. But nothing wrong with, you know, contraception methods. It is allowed in Islam. كنا نعزل والصحابة كانوا يعزلون, and they will, you know, will make sure to use that methods of contraception where women will not get pregnant. There is a talk, there is almost an agreement among modern scholars that a woman not allowed to terminate her ability to get pregnant again in the future unless there is a threat to her life. Okay? And there is a good argument for that. Allah forbid, what if a car accident and you lost most of your kids? Okay, fine. You know, what if you get married again? Especially if you're still young. You know, there's a lot of possibility. But can I stop this? Yes, you can. I would prefer this another. I have an article about that and a lot of nuance to it. I don't take it literally like that. I do believe even women, when they are at certain point in their life and they feel that they want to stop pregnancy, they are allowed at certain circumstances. But I want to focus on the abortion because there's a lot of point. Like she mentioned the area where there is an agreement. Let's use this word so nobody can pick up some technically. Okay, an agreement or like almost an agreement between the scholars. And just for her defense, statement she said, not her, but the statement she made, this is the statement of the scholars.
Which one?
That there is a consensus, there is an agreement between the scholars. Many scholars have mentioned ijma' al-ulama after 120 days. It's not allowed to terminate the pregnancy unless there is a threat for the woman's life. Many of the Shafi'i scholars, many of the Maliki scholars have in the old days, in the old books, in the traditional books of fiqh, they mention the word ijma' on this.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Okay, so, so Reem, you've mentioned 40 days and you've mentioned 120 days. Could you just give us a background as to where these two numbers are coming from?
So the majority of ikhtilaf or difference of opinion that comes when scholars talk about or in the discourse of abortion is that when does the ruh or the spirit or the soul enter the embryo or the fetus? So when does this piece of meat or piece of clay inside the mother's body become an actual living being, right? Because in the beginning, it's just a piece of flesh. It doesn't have a life, it's not breathing, it doesn't have a heartbeat. And then eventually the spirit or the ruh is blown into this embryo, so it becomes a living thing, and it becomes something that has a life. So there are two major opinions amongst the scholars. And the majority of the traditional scholars follow the opinion of 120 days, that the embryo becomes a living being after 120 days. And they base this on the hadith, this hadith that is both in Bukhari and Muslim, and it was narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'ud. The hadith goes as follows: إن أحدكم يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه 40 يوما نطفة ثم يكون علقة مثل ذلك ثم يكون مضغة مثل ذلك ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه الروح ويؤمر بأربع كلمات, so on and so forth. So the hadith translates is that each one of you is constituted in the womb of the mother for 40 days. And then he becomes a clot of thick blood for a similar period, as in also for 40 days. And then a piece of flesh for a similar period, as in another 40 days. So it's 40, 40, 40 days. Then, which is after 120 days, then God sends an angel who is ordered to write 4 things, and the hadith goes on as follows. So majority of the classical scholars took from this hadith that the embryo becomes a living being after 120 days. The other opinion is 40 days, and that is from another hadith, which says that if a drop of semen spent in the womb for 40 nights, Allah sends an angel to it who depicts it and creates its ears, eyes, skin, flesh, and bones. When the scholars attempted to reconcile the two hadith, they said that the 40 days that's being referred to in the second hadith is actually talking about when the ears are formed, or when the features are formed, but not when the soul itself enters the embryo, because the first hadith is more explicit in that manner. Yeah, so those are the two major opinions as to when does the soul enter the fetus.
So far, just so that we've got clarity, we've got 120 days. After 120 days, we have unanimous agreement by the scholars with regard to it not being allowed, and then you have the majority saying unless the mother is, her life is threatened. And then between 40 and 120 days, what do we have?
So between 40 and 120 days, you have a difference of opinion in this matter, but when it comes to the classical scholars, because many of them believed that the soul has not yet entered the body in this time period, that extreme circumstances allow for abortion. So, for example, in a case of rape, or in a case of a extreme deformity to the body of the child that would not allow it to live a practical or an easy life, or it wouldn't be a case of it would have to be an extreme case of difficulty in the time period between 40 and 120 days, and this is with some of the scholars, obviously not all of them.
And Sheikh Waleed, this is the period where I'm assuming you're getting phone calls and people are asking you these questions, 40 to 120 days. Between that period of time, you mentioned a number of scenarios. You mentioned fear of poverty. You mentioned this notion of you've got a sick child, or someone who, by now you're hearing from your doctors if there's any particular impairments that your child is going to have. Which one of these would be allowed? And even with regards to extreme deformity, what does that mean?
See, for me, abortion in the first 40 days is the majority of scholars that it is allowed. And it is permissible in the first 40 days. And that's, I stand by this claim that there is a majority opinion in the classic fiqh. But some of them said allowed, some people said dislike. And I lean towards the opinion that it is dislike, something not encouraged. And from 40 to 120, only allowed in extreme, or in it is a very good valid reason. And valid reason can be an issue of rape, issue of genetic disorder, for example, some diseases, Also, it could be a very domestic violence abuse inside the house, that it can cause a great deal of disturbing in the marriage and the future of this young lady to be just a single mom when she's like 18 or 19 years old or 20 years old, and now she has to have this baby with her on her own. And that's also an area where, if we look at this case, see that this is, you know what, she doesn't have any support. Okay? And we tried to tell her, hey, keep the pregnancy. But if she found, I'll be a permissible too. Another area will be an area of, we said the issue of medical reasons for domestic violence, abuse, divorce, stuff like that. Also, multiple children's, many children's, and she got pregnant again, and she is psychologically not ready to have a child. Having a child is not an easy thing, in the body, on the mental, on the, I can say as much as I want as a man, but in the end of the day, the pregnancy itself, the experience, the psychological impact of it, especially with the lack of support, makes it very difficult for a woman to do that. So if she comes to me and we discuss this, we're trying to find solution, no, I will allow it in the first 120 days.
Is it an issue of fatwa?
It is fatwa. So, but as a general rules, I only allowed it in a very clear need in the first 120 days. And in the first 40 days, I dislike it. I will not encourage her to do. After 120 days, it is only allowed when the mother's well-being is in danger. And I want to say the well-being is something that threatens her life in danger. And I found even some modern scholars said that will include her going into a very severe suicidal depression after 120 days.
I was just going to ask you if mental well-being is.
So let's see, she's raped, she didn't figure it out until 120 days, and she was raped by, a relative, something like so extreme like that, fragile, that can psychologically cause so much damage to her. You tell her this is not the baby's fault, it will, there's a lot of therapy you can go through, how to look at your child and not to remember the rapist, but to remember, the beauty of this life. We can talk, but we found out, what? Not everybody's strong. Not everybody can take that. And we found, like, by consulting doctors, this can be a suicidal. This can be a threat. There is people who took their own life after that. That's not just made it up. That I found some modern scholars allowed even abortion after 120 days for this particular reason. But that's a fatwa, has to be done. I want to say about the 120 days, and I know we have a nurse, we have a doctor here.
Sheikh, before you
yes.
move on, maybe you could discuss how this also, because we're talking about principles of fiqh. So the aqal al-dararain, like the lesser of two harms, which is why it would be something that's allowed.
Yes, yeah. Basically, we allowed it because it's less harm. Very, absolutely. But for me, why I would say it is a makruh or allowed in 120 days, because I don't believe that this is alive human beings yet. It became alive human beings in 120 days. And you might say, Sheikh, you can hear the heartbeat. You can see the movement. Heartbeat and movement of baby, it doesn't mean that it has a soul. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He mentioned, He said, ثُمَّ أَنشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the person goes through stages of living. And one of the stages of living is to have that movement. That's why al-fuqaha, they call her hayatun nabatiyya. The Muslim jurists use the word, it's like a living creature, like what? Like trees, it's a living creature. But it does not take the same rule as a living creature of animals. That's a different type of life. And they give a better example. Adam alayhi salam, before the soul was breathing into him, or given to him, he was a human being. And he has all the features of human beings. But when the soul, he became a new life, a new form of life. When you die and your soul depart, you're still here. I know doctors can't comprehend that if they're not Muslims, but even when you die, you still hear people around you, and you see. And there's a whole entire type of life. Khalqan akhar, it's a different level of life. So that's why we're not like the fuqaha was, they understand the baby, they can hear the baby's heartbeat, they can see the movement in the stomach before the 120 days, but they said all this will not change the fact that the soul, this will be considered a human being if 120. The other fuqaha who said, no, it is not allowed, it is because that will lead to a human being. So they said, you terminate this, now it means you ending up the possibility of somebody to live. It's like when I see you need some food and I stop the food from you for you to die, as if I didn't kill you, but I caused the death to you. So that's why they said it's not allowed. So both agree that even if you don't call it a living thing yet, they have a different look at it. Some said, even if it's not a living, you're still not allowed to do it. And those who said, no, it is allowed. And I think it's a moderate position to say it is highly dislike. It is not allowed unless there is a good reason. I think it's a very balanced, in my opinion, in regard to this.
Sheikh, my question for you is this, is that it's obviously always an urgent issue. When you're talking about abortion, you're literally talking about a child growing every single day in her womb. And at the same time, you're saying that it's an issue of fatwa. And so for this woman who is, she doesn't have a Sheikh Wali to call. She's got, she's calling random, she doesn't necessarily know. Are there can she just hold on to those particular guidelines that you mentioned?
No, I said call Sadr Reem, call Sheikh Ammar, call someone. Don't rush to that. Call. Don't just make your own fatwa on this. This is a serious issue. I'll tell you, many people that they come to me and they talk, like most of the cases that I dealt with in abortion, it ended up with no abortion.
Ajib.
Most of the cases.
Okay.
And I said to because I try to, in my opinion, women go to abortion because they feel there is no other options. The moment they see an option, and I know a kid come to the masjid, he was supposed to be terminated. And that's every time I saw him walk into the masjid on his feet, I was like, I'm so glad that she didn't do it.
Alhamdulillah.
And I asked her one question. I said, why would you want to do it? She said, I can't. It's just so hard. I'm alone. I'm this. So I sat with the father. I have a call with the father. I said, you have to be committed. You have to take days off. You have to help. You can't leave her like that. And the moment she saw the commitment of the father, you have to hire a maid. I said, even if I have to give you money, to help you. And his bride said, no, I don't need your money. I said, I will hire a maid for you just to make sure that to serve the sister. And when she found all the support, she said, okay, I'll keep the baby. Another way I tell, and this is a message to any sister listening to me today debating this issue, one other thing I'll say. I'll tell you, sister, I don't know anyone who decided to keep the baby, regretted keeping the baby. I don't know anyone. I haven't heard that yet, at least myself. That's number one. Number two, I ask sometimes a question. I said, when you decide to terminate the baby or the pregnancy, you don't know. Maybe that child that you want to end its pregnancy is the one child that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have chosen for you that will be the reason for you to go to Jannah. He's the only righteous one in your all children. Maybe he will be eventually the most beloved one to you. Maybe he will be, who knows? Not because it's something I say it's allowed, it means you do it. And I have to be very careful about that. These are still in the exceptions cases. Okay? So, If you worry about poverty, that's even became worse because this is the tawakkul issue. But you know what? With the planning, with a good, Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad once, somebody told him, somebody came to him angry. He said, my wife keep getting pregnant. As if she get pregnant by herself, and you're part of the whole thing. He said, she's getting pregnant. Then Fudayl said, and so we don't have money. Then Fudayl said, see whatever from your kids you think Allah will not take care of him, send him to me, I'll take care of him. He's being sarcastic, but he brings, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that don't have any plan. You should have a plan. You should, have a plan how your children will be, space-wise, Not every woman the same. For God's sake, there is, mashallah, sisters, have 10 children and they keep going. May bless their wombs and bless their life. طيب, no, but not every woman like that.
I mean,
but not every woman capable of that, and we have to understand that. Anyway, so I think this is a fatwa issue, and I highly recommend you don't rush into this issue. In the non-Muslim world, they talk about options like adoptions, and I feel ashamed to say that to the Muslims. But you know what? It's been proven. The more there is adoptions options, the less there is abortion, believe it or not.
well, Sheikh, you just opened up a huge door of conversation that I don't think we're going to have all the time to get to, but it's the issue of community support. Just the amount of assistance that's required in raising a child and how that can be something that really, really facilitates for people the ability to keep their children. And even as we're talking about abortion in the American context, we can't remove it from the root causes like Sheikh Kamal mentioned, which is the lack of external support. And so Sheikh Kamal, do you still want to talk about some of the root causes, or is there another point that you'd like to make?
No, I mean, I'm anxious to hear from some of the audience members here. I know Sister Catherine was, are you sure? We've got a microphone right there. She was saying, are you going to say, and she was like, all in my face. I'm just kidding.
Give her the microphone.
Are you going to say baby or are you going to say fetus? And that's why I was hoping you would explain the different microphone here. This one in the middle.
Is the microphone there?
Yeah, that one right there.
Just come on up, sister.
Maybe it's more comfortable for her. Okay.
So I'm going to say something different as opposed to what I said earlier.
Just come up closer to the mic.
Whenever you were talking, Sheikh Kamal, you referenced a teenage girl, or maybe two teenage girls, who had multiple abortions. They were being seen at the clinic over and over again. And then it was like separate from an issue of rape, referencing rape being such a minimal amount of abortions. A teenager, a young woman who's getting pregnant over and over and over again, we really need to reflect on, is that always by choice? And maybe she's not reporting it as rape, but what's going on in her life that's allowing her to be in that situation over and over again? And maybe it's not defined as rape, or maybe it's not reported as rape, but there's certainly something going on.
Well said. Well said.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, and that's what I was alluding to when I said I refused to take part in, when I was a younger guy, in the class, because you're just discussing this end result here, but you don't want to talk about all the things that lead to that. Exactly right, what Sister Catherine said, like, why is she coming 16 times? And what mechanism are you going to put in place to educate young girls at that age, as opposed to, here's, do whatever you do, and then here's the solution. Just come to this place and get it taken care of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Correct.
Absolutely. Like, the number of teenagers in high school that, unfortunately, by the way, I hear stories even among our community, a pregnancy out of wedlock, and she drunk, a lot of girls don't have that family support. And she's not like, unfortunately, these are, especially a society at large, if we talk about Muslim being mercy to mankind, we should talk about that. We should defend the right of these young girls. But in the same times, we're not defending zina. We're not defending adultery. Because one of the things that is kind of surprise to me, I was visiting one country, it's mainly Catholic country. Oh my God, I never seen children in my life like this country. I never seen so many babies in my life like that country. It's unbelievable number of babies.
The amount of babies?
The
Okay.
amount of babies, just, it's noticeable. Like, I don't want to say, just let me move. So I asked, they said because contraception is not allowed. It's forbidden, the church forbid that. I said, and that church can't forbid also adultery? Zina? These guys are not married. They're all boyfriend, girlfriend.
Yeah.
It just, I can't comprehend that. How can you say like, it's a joke in Muslim fiqh. Somebody committing zina, and when he used, a contraception method, she said, no, it's haram. And she's fornicating with him.
Yeah.
It's like drink khamr with the left hand, no, with the right hand. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. I think Islam also does not bring a full solution to the issue. And one of the solution is to make sure that our girls protect, our boys protect themselves, not involved in zina, not involved in haram. And unfortunately, sometimes when people rush to abortion, it's just because she want to cover the sin of adultery. I give those people a very hard time when they come to me. Sheikh, I'm pregnant, I'm not married. I give her a very hard time. I really grill her and him. And the only time I will be lenient when I know that she can be in danger. Like some family can literally hurt her, can kill her. In case like this, I will allow. But other than that, I will not. I will close the door. Or I know her life will be completely destroyed. In certain culture, would be completely destroyed. And I will maybe allow it. But other than that, no, I'll be very strict. I know she can take care of her. No, it's not going to be a big deal. Do whatever you want. But, you can't cover your sin. But so we don't open the door for zina.
Is there any scenarios in our culture still where that wouldn't be a big deal?
Yeah.
A girl having a baby outside
Yeah, she can say, I married someone in secret, whatever, and that's it.
Keep it moving.
Like what?
Microphone. Hold the mic.
I was asking about the harms to the baby in a case if you don't allow a certain girl, let's say her life is not in danger, but this child would be known a child that was born out of zina.
No, she will say, I married someone in private and secret, whatever. She will find a way to. She doesn't have a family structure
But
like.
the child won't have, if she doesn't end up marrying the person who she committed zina with, the child won't have a family.
No, she should sue that guy in court and take child support.
But that's financial. What about the emotional and the
There's a lot of single
mental
moms.
harms?
There's a lot of single moms. That's why I look at case by case. Like certain culture, it is acceptable. So like understand how to do it, to live this way. It's a very different cultures. Like in certain
I actually
culture,
think it would be easier to do that in the American culture as far as raising a child as a single mom than in some of our traditional Muslim cultures.
absolutely.
I think one of the good things about the stories that you're mentioning is that it lets people know that this is happening in the Muslim community. Like I'm wondering, the low turnout tonight, is it due to just kind of Ramadan fatigue, or is it that we don't care about this topic? And a lot of times we do this thing where, this is not an issue in our community.
No.
One of my Imam friends, he does like a workshop on abuse and molestation and stuff like that. He says when the class is over, there is a long line of sisters just waiting. And one by one, Sheikh, I was molested. Sheikh, I was abused. Sheikh was assaulted. This is happening in our communities. And in some cities, it's like an insane,
even pregnancy out of ancestors exist. I deal with it. I will tell you, like, I don't want to be exaggerating, but in the year, if I take the cases that I personally get exposed to, but not only in Houston community, I also deal with the
Nationwide.
I would say it's at least once a month. I get a question like that, at least. You know, so it is an issue, and I'm glad that you wrote about it. I'm glad that people create awareness about it, and I want to see more community awareness, community support. I do believe when there is a support, I'm glad Sister Ashma, she's starting a support group for sisters in the masjid here. These issues need a lot of support. But I have something about the 120 days. Maybe Dr. Nadeem can help with that. According to the why in the medical community, they counted the days. It's actually technically, it should be 134 days, not 120 days, based on how medically pregnancy is determined.
What do you mean, the soul, the breathing of the soul?
Yeah, so 40, 40, 40, there's a difference between how the Muslim jurists look at it while doctors consider it. Like there is a two.
It's a way of counting.
Yes.
So if you're counting it based on.
Can you give me a microphone so the people online can hear it? Yeah. Or you can use that microphone if you want. Yeah.
If you count day one, in the medical community, we count day one based on the last menstrual period.
Mm-hmm.
So if we base it on the last menstrual period, then typically fertilization occurs about 2 weeks after the last menstrual period. So that's where that 2 week factor comes
Yeah.
from.
Yeah. Where in fuqaha they don't do that.
No, they do it from when they think actual conception occurred.
Yeah.
So that's why you would add the 2 weeks to our medical terminology, because we're basing on the last menstrual.
So when the doctor tell you 100, if you want 120 days according to the Sharia, it's when the doctor tell you 134 days.
And I also think that's interesting because that's very close to when
I'm not sure if you talk about
the
that in
fetus
the
could
article.
actually live by itself. So if you look at right now with medical science, a fetus can live outside the womb at about 20 weeks, somewhere between 20 and 22 weeks, depending on how far along, how good all the conditions are. And that's very close to the 134 times, so maybe with time.
But not on its own.
On its own.
Outside in the air.
Outside the womb. So
No, but inside an environment, like an artificial environment.
Yeah, inside an incubator and things of that
Okay,
nature. But
so
that's the first time it has
incubator.
a chance of living.
Okay.
Prior to that, if it's prior to that, there's no chance. Like we don't even try to resuscitate the baby.
So we consider inside the incubator, it doesn't have a soul yet until it's 120 days. So it doesn't matter even if it's not the
But
womb.
at 120 days before that, there's no chance even in the incubator.
Yeah.
So for example, we get lots of women
Excellent.
that have early miscarriage, things of that nature. Based on the dates, we'll decide whether we even want to try to resuscitate the baby.
Mhm.
And if it's before the 20 weeks, we don't even try because it's modern medical science cannot get that baby to live. So it'll be a futile attempt. We might be able to make it live for a little bit, but not for, it won't have a successful outcome. Whereas after 20 weeks, we'll attempt to resuscitate the baby.
Is that why in the United States, it used to be abortion illegal after 120 days?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Texas law used to say at 20 weeks. Now the Texas law has moved to a heartbeat law, which is at 6 or 7 weeks. And so nobody even knows they're pregnant. That's the problem. They don't even realize that they're pregnant. They just missed their period. They're like 2 weeks into it, and now they're like, oh, I've missed my date. And now I need to find it, it's pretty common, as we all know, abortion. Now they're trying to find an abortion. They're going to Oklahoma and other states because they can't do it in Texas anymore.
For the 40 days, one of the benefits of it, I get a lot of question about the, what do you call that, after morning pills?
Morning after.
Morning after, yeah, the morning after pill that people take. Is that considered abortion or not? So is this allowed contraception method or not? Basically, based on where I stand, it's in the first 40 days, it is just dislike. So, and also there's no yaqeen that there is any pregnancy and stuff like that. So.
Sheikh, wouldn't that even be before conception? So it wouldn't even be considered an
It's
abortion?
after conception.
If it's the morning after,
Yeah.
it'd be after.
Oh.
Yeah, but what if she got pregnant in that day?
Like it was fertilized.
So, good.
Good.
Another one also, I get a question a lot. is using IUD as a form of abortion.
Yeah. I think Louisiana's passed it, or some senator from there was
Yeah, even
trying
some
to
fuqaha,
legalize it.
even some Muslim jurists talk about IUD as a form of abortion. In modern days, this is haram to use this methods in contraception because actually it killed the child. And that's not true also. There is not a correct opinion. It's not a form of abortion or anything like that. Is no conception yet that consider alaqah in the 40 days. That's number one. Number two, it's interesting to know that AUD as a method, the Arab used. Can you believe that? It's interesting. But they did not use it in human. They used it in camels. They actually created a pipe and they put in the pipe stones and some kind of fill it with things, and they put it inside the female private part of the camel. So if she got, mated with the male camel, she will not get pregnant because of that. So they have a very similar concept as well, which is interesting to know from a historical background.
So would that
anyway.
be makruh also, for the camel?
No, no, camel. We're focusing on human right now, but AED it is permissible as long as it is. It's not because I get these questions a lot for whatever reason. Sisters quoting that it's haram, it's not allowed methods because it's a form of abortion, but it's not actually a form of abortion.
Well, with that, we end inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair, everybody. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless. Thank you to our guest Reem today, inshallah ta'ala, and to our regular panelists, Sheikh Kamal and Sheikh Wareed. Inshallah, we'll see y'all next week, inshallah ta'ala, with a new topic. Barakallahu feekum.